Welcome to my note-taking guide and tutorial for fast, versatile, and academic writing. Now, before I get to the main purpose of this video, I want to tackle what is the problem, or is there a problem, and why you should care. Alright, so what's the problem with normal note-taking, or say on paper, or things like Word? So first of all, when writing notes on paper, it takes a lot of time and hand-eye coordination because in a college setting or university, your tutor is probably going to explain the lecture and will most likely continue to do so at a fast pace, which means there's very little time for you to copy. And then you might think, okay then, I'll just type these things out in a notepad or in Word, which is a good start, but not there yet. So when writing things, or when writing notes with something like a notepad, you are very limited in the things that you do. You might have to note down complex equations or have text formatting. Then you go, okay, what if I use Word then? Well, that is fine, but it can also be time consuming. You're going to have to click a lot of options, you're going to have to highlight the text you want to format, and you can see where I'm going with this. It will only slow you down, so might as well stick to paper and pencil, because if you try to have complex equations in words, you're going to have to go through the tabs, and you're going to have to insert a lot of things, which again is very time consuming. Now, let's ask the question again. Can it be done? Can you take notes without compromising speed and versatility? Well, the answer is yes. And what's the solution? The solution is, I present to you the combined power of Markdown, LaTeX, and Pandoc. Alright, so what is Markdown? As you can see here, there's a Markdown guide. It's a free and open source reference guide that explains how to use Markdown, the simple and easy to use markup language you can use to format virtually any document. And the syntax is very simple as well, which is amazing. Next is LaTeX. I'm going to go back to this, but I just want to quickly explain what stuff we're using. Alright, so LaTeX, let's go to, is a document preparation system, and LaTeX is really powerful for writing a lot of complex equations, a lot of formulas and whatnot. But the problem with LaTeX is, again, it takes time to set up a LaTeX document. There's a lot of semantics that you have to write and you have to know to get up a basic document. And when you're writing notes, that can again be time consuming. And next is Pandoc. Right? So about Pandoc, it is simply a file converter. So the goal of Pandoc is to convert Markdown files into PDFs using LaTeX. Alright, so back to Markdown. Now with Markdown, you can do things like formatting, bold, or say italic without having to go and highlight the text and then do that like what you do in Word. So if we get started here and we look at the what is Markdown, I highly recommend reading this. And why use Markdown? So I'm going to go through this. Markdown is portable, it is platform independent, it is future-proof, it is everywhere. Markdown, you don't need to install anything, you just have to specify that it's a Markdown file, and pretty much a lot of platforms support Markdown files anyways. And here you can see Markdown can be used for everything. People use it to create websites, documents, notes, books, presentations, email, messages, and technical documentations. And kicking the tires. In Markdown, you don't really need to install anything. You don't need to download. You can even just use a notepad and then use a Markdown parser to read it. I will show you how to write an example note later on, but I want you to go through the cheat sheet, for example, and these are some of the options that you can do, and these can be more complex, but you're writing this all down. You're not clicking on things. You're always writing, and this is important because as you take notes, it's preferable not to take your hands off the keyboard and you keep writing. So there's a lot of syntaxes that you can use. So for example, if you want to bold text, you can use this Markdown syntax, and if you want a block code, you can use this Markdown syntax. And there's more complex syntaxes like definition list or strike throughs, task list, and emojis and whatnot. And now the real goal is how to take notes. First of all, as I mentioned, you don't need to install anything from Markdown. You just need a code editor, and one example is a VSCode or even Notepad++. You can use Notepad++, but I would recommend Visual Studio Code, and you don't need to know necessarily how to program. It is a code editor, and then you have to install Pandoc for your platform. They have a guide for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. And then you have to make sure that you can run the Pandoc commands in your command line or command prompt. Afterwards, you need to get LaTeX. This is so that you can convert to PDFs. And you might think, that's a lot of things. That's a lot of stuff to install. But remember, if once you get the hang of it, you can pretty much write beautifully formatted documents as well as take notes quickly. And it really sets you apart from your peers or other ways to write notes. So let's just I'm going to quickly demonstrate the power of this altogether. So let's create a Markdown file. Let's call it notes.md. So MD is Markdown format. Again, Markdown is pretty much readable with almost any kind of document or code editor. As you can see here on the right side, there's a preview, and this is where I'm writing my things. So let's say I want to put my detail author, so Leonardo, and then we can put our date here. Let's say Friday 25th, 2020, and this is kind of just like a basic setup. And then we can put our title. What's the title of this note? Just call it notes. Now, usually in Markdown, you can't do the syntax, but once you convert it with Pandoc, it's going to detect the LaTeX types and syntax, and it's going to convert that. So let's say make title. Now on the Markdown preview, it doesn't look like it's much, but let's convert it to PDF. So notes. I'm going to go through this command. It's just an alias, so you don't need to worry about that for now. If I open this, as you can see, it already formatted that for us. So there's the title, notes, author, and the date into PDF. Okay, so let's say I want a table of contents. You just specify table of contents. And now let me save that, and let's try to convert that using Pandoc. As you can see, the contents is empty. But here's the amazing part. Once you're taking notes, you can use the headers as a section, and this is a subsection, and you can have a section content. And let's say you have a list, so item 1, item 2, then once you convert that to PDF, as you can see, we have our section and our subsection here. Now let's say I want this to be a new page. This one are LaTeX syntax, and these are Markdown syntax. I recommend reading through them. I'm not going to go in depth because this is kind of more of a guide. So as I convert that to PDF, we specified to new page, and it starts on the new page. These are all done automatically by Markdown LaTeX, and then Pandoc detects that and formats that for us. So we have another section here. Let's say section 2 and subsection, say notes and extra stuff. Go ahead and convert that. As you can see, section 2, subsection, and the contents is going to update that. Now it can be less generic, of course, something like introduction, and say a title and something about it, another thing about it, and when we convert that to PDF using Pandoc, it formats them for you. And so using the Markdown syntax, we can also have code highlighting. We can use that as something like a normal highlight. So this is highlighted text, while this isn't. And we can say italic and bold. The point here is to show that I'm writing all this and I'm formatting it at the same time without having to click on the text and then highlight it and then bold it and whatnot. And once I convert that, as you can see here, this is a highlighted text, this is italic, this is bold, and these are all Markdown syntax, as well as these are LaTeX. And this can even get more complicated. So let's have a code block here, a fenced code block, and let me look for a sample equation. Let's see, I'm on my second screen. Let's look for a physics equation. This is how we can use the power of LaTeX to create complex equations. You just have to go through them, the documentation. Let's see, I'm looking for a equation that can show, let's say E. So this is specified that it's a LaTeX format. So E, I think it's subscript E equal to minus K, and let's say, let's see if that can pass first. I hope. Alright. Subscripts in LaTeX. Okay, so I don't know what I'm writing honestly, but let's say E equals MC squared, because that's a pretty popular formula. And if we go ahead and compile that, as you can see, oh, oops, yes, that. Oh, my bad. That's because it's in the fence block. Alright. So, yeah, I have to close that. So here's a formula example. And as you can see, Markdown formatted it. You can even go more complex with this. So let me try this equation here. Let's try this. These are all generated by, this is LaTeX stuff, but it's converted using Pandoc, and you take notes quickly using Markdown. And as you can see here, it's all written out, it's not selected or anything. This is probably going to boost your productivity, and highly recommended. Highly recommend trying it out and practicing it. Once you get the hang of the syntax, you probably won't even go back. Now, let's look at the what this is doing. So Markdown to Pandoc is basically just a command that has a V geometry. Notes. Okay. When I call Markdown to Pandoc, this is an alias for this command that takes a Markdown file and converts it into a PDF, which is what is shown here. It also has a margin, because usually Markdown without the margin, it's gonna have like really wide spaces, margins between the edges or from the edges. Alright, so I hope that makes sense. It shows how much you can do with it. I've only scratched the surface, but once again, when you memorize the syntax, once you understand how it works, it's just an amazing tool, and you can quickly write notes without having to worry too much on the formatting. You just keep on writing, add that syntax, add that Markdown syntax, add that LaTeX syntax, and then you can have really beautiful notes. Another thing you can also do, before I forget, let me just quickly transfer an image here. You can add figures. So where is this located? Here. Alright. We can add figures. So this is a minimalist tunnel picture. Now let's go ahead and do that. This is the Markdown syntax. We can call this minimalist tunnel, and it takes that minimalist tunnel.png. Once I do that, once I convert that to PDF using Pandoc, let me just open that. Which one is it? Let's just call this figure, right? And we have to put the proper file location. Once we, right now it's converted that. As you can see, it put its own, it put a figure 1 and the figure label, so we can call this minimalistic tunnel. And once we convert that to PDF again using Pandoc, it's going to put that figure name here. Again, I'm only scratching the surface, but I really recommend checking it out, reading about it. Once you memorize some of the basic syntax, it's going to boost your productivity, and I cannot stress that enough. It has boosted a lot of my noting process. I don't have to memorize a lot of things. I just have to write the basic syntax and write the basic formulas, for example, and add figures as I take screenshots. Yeah, so it's an amazing tool. Check it out and get familiar with it. Good luck.